I got some stuff I want to talk to you about today. Let's start by going to Job chapter 12. Job chapter 12. Job is right before the book of Psalms. The book of Psalms has cracked the Bible in half. Psalms is usually right in the middle. I got a question for you before we get started. You know, Job is the story of the man who lost everything. Lost everything. And it shows his journey, major journey inward. He also has to go outward and deal with a lot of external matters as well. But this morning, there's going to be a way to start the lesson. I'm going to ask you, first off, this question. And seriously consider it with. Do you think you're smarter than an animal? Are you smarter than an animal? Wiser than an animal? Maybe that's another way to ask the question. I was always taught about moving on. I was always told that there was a lesson that my dad listened to when he was a child. And he'd always tell me about this lesson, and I'm just going to do something for you today, the same thing that this individual did. My dad said he never forgot the lesson because this man stood in front of everybody and he said, if the shoe fits, wear it. And this is what he did. If the shoe fits, wear it. I'm not going to say like this because I've been leaning this way the whole time. Preach like that. So, you know, there's nothing wrong, back now. Nothing wrong with, it would have been better with Birkenstocks, by the way. Nothing wrong with really just owning a couple of facts and taking a look at a couple of situations. And realizing that there's some pretty in-your-face lessons from the Bible that we really need to take a look at. I want to start with some of those today. While we're in Job chapter 12, we will be coming back to Job, so you can like put your bookmark up there if you want. Hebrews 12 and Job 12, that's where the main portion of the lesson is going to be. But I'd like to read verses 7 and 8 with you out of Job 12. Job 12, verses 7 and 8 says, but ask now the beasts, and they shall teach you, and the birds of the air, and they shall tell you. Speak to the earth, and it shall teach you, and the fish of the sea shall declare unto thee. So we got an interesting situation right here with Job. He's using a lot of poetic language. That's what Job does. He's just been basically rebuked by one of his buddies, and he's responding here in chapter 12, and he is offering a type of defense for himself. And he is acknowledging his friend, but his friend keeps on rebuking him, and he's saying, hey, let's just take a look at what's really going on right now. Let's take a look at the world and see what's really going on right now. And he said, even the birds and the animals, even they can see some. Let's learn some things from them. So I'm going to take you to just a handful of lessons to see if we can learn just a few things from the animals now. So I asked you the question, are you smarter than an animal? Let's go to Isaiah chapter 1. I'm going to go to just a handful of verses and just show a few of them to you. Isaiah chapter 1. I'm going to go somewhat quickly here. This is the way the prophet Isaiah And it introduces the book. Now, the book of Isaiah is all about prophesying to the children of Judah, or the kingdom of Judah, when they were rebelling against God. Verse 3, it says, the ox knows his owner, and the donkey knows his master's crib. But Israel does not know. My people do not consider. So, I ask the question, are you smarter than an animal? You know, I mean, have you disobeyed God? Have you not respected God? Have you turned your back on God? Well, obviously, you must not be as smart as an animal, because even the donkey knows. Even the, what was the other animal? Even the ox knows, right? So, let's take a look at a couple others. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 16. Second Peter chapter 2, verse 16. Now, we're in a text right here where Peter is very strongly writing in this epistle. And he is warning against false prophets and things such as that. And so in the midst of him doing this warning, in fact, chapter 2, the whole chapter is like almost totally dedicated. It's like a third of the whole epistle dedicated to making sure that people know not to turn their back on God. So in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 16, here's what I'm going to do with you right now, okay? I'm going to read you the King James Version of the Bible. You understand? King James Version of the Bible. That's the version that I usually use, okay? And it's not really all that suitable in a lot of times. In fact, one of the things that I do while I'm reading the King James Version while I study, it's the version that I know. So as I read it, I kind of adjust a few words here and there while I'm reading it to make it more contemporary for the ears of the listeners. But I'm not going to do that with this verse right now. I'm just going to show you. 2 Peter 2, verse 16, it says, I'm going to read verse 15 with it. Which have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Bosor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumb ass, speaking with man's voice, forbade the madness of the prophet. You guys ever hear somebody say, I can read the writing on the wall? You know, it's a biblical phrase. People in the world, secular people, they use that terminology. They have no idea that comes from the Bible. You know, when someone calls someone a dumbass, you know where that came from? I just read it straight out of the King James Bible, so please don't be offended. Okay? Children, please don't repeat that, by the way. I'm looking at you. But Balaam was so stubborn, he couldn't see what the donkey could see, right? We people, we just be acting like animals. Even animals are smarter than us sometimes. Shoe fits where you just got to own these things sometimes. Take a look at verse 22 of the same 2 Peter chapter 2. Verse 22 says, but it has happened to them according to the true proverb, the dog is turned to his own vomit again, and the pig that was washed for wallowing in the mud. So, dogs, you know, they do this thing. A lot of people who own dogs have seen this. It's real pleasant to the palate to think about. But maybe some of you have never owned a dog, or maybe your dog is a little more sophisticated than the other dogs in the world. So I'll just explain this verse to you. Sometimes the dog will eat his breakfast, okay? And then in the afternoon, for some reason, his belly ain't feeling so well. So what he'll do is he'll vomit it up. My dog, his name is Wood, best dog you ever saw. When he vomited, he was actually a black pit bull, amazing dog. When he threw up, it was about 2 feet high. go back and eat that all back up. Just, gourmet. Now, these are some of the things that we are warned about. All of them, every single one of them is about either respecting God or not leaving God. Every one of them, turning your back on God. So, are you as smart as an animal? Psalm 32 and verse 9. Take you to another text. It says over here, this is King David. The context here, he's actually talking about the problem of not confessing your sin. He actually says in verse 3, when I kept silence, as in kept from confessing my sins, it just was like melting my bones within me, burning me up. It was not good. I was drying up from the inside out. Toward the end of the psalm, he makes this statement, verse 9. Be not as the horse or as the mule, which have no understanding, whose mouth must be held in with a bit and a bridle, lest they come near unto thee. So I wanted to just share all this with you because it's a reality check. That's one of the first main things I wanted to point out. The scriptures uses a lot of these animal metaphors to honestly belittle us when we're disrespecting God. That's the whole point. When you're disrespecting God, it's insane to not respect God. Even the donkey knows, even the ox knows to respect his owner. If he doesn't, he becomes dinner. Okay? That's what happens to an animal that is so unruly that they can't control it. It's just a reality check. Now, the reason why I'm going into all this is because it reminds me of one of our good buddies from the Good Word of God. His name is Esau. So now I'm going to take you to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12 is where we left off in our series that we're going through the book of Hebrews right now. And I'm going to read with you a couple of verses out of here. Hebrews 12, verses 15 and 16. Now, before we read these verses, I want to refresh your memory on the context. The book of Hebrews is all about the Old Testament and how the Old Testament has been fulfilled in Jesus. All the good stuff from the Old Testament, Jesus fulfilled all of it. We are extremely blessed. But there's a couple of warnings that come with that. A couple of things that are reality checks. Because they, in those days, had much less, but we're still able to accomplish so much. How much more are we to accomplish that we have the gospel of the Son, Jesus Christ? Abraham was able to be as faithful as he was. How much more faithful are we to be? And he really is going to be using those kinds of metaphors in the wrapping up of the epistle here. So he says, verses 15 and 16, look diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness spring up trouble you, and thereby many are defiled. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. Remember how I pointed out that many of those animal examples were warning about just disrespecting God or leaving God. Now, we have this metaphor given to us here about Esau. And so what I wanted to point out is that was one of Esau's big problems, is he behaved like an animal. He was acting like an animal. When you go back and look at the story, it's just pathetic. It's just this pathetic thing that he went through. He comes back from the field. His brothers, it's almost like his brother was concocting like a potion or something, like to get his brother's birthright. He's to stir in this pot. His brother comes back from the field, and he's just like, "Oh man, I'm so tired." He's like an animal. I'm so hungry. I have no control over the fact that if I probably wait 30 minutes, I could probably find something to eat. But he's being more like an animal his whole thought process is, I'm hungry, so I'm just going to trade my birthright and give all of it up just because of my flesh. This is the problem with animals. See, the animals that we've taken a look at in the scriptures, just think about the one in Isaiah. The donkey knows his master's crib. The ox knows who his master is, right? You know how he knows? Because as soon as he opens up the door to the stable, he's got food in his hand. Pretty much the animal is a slave to feast or famine. The animal is all about the fears and flavors. That's basically as far as the mind of an animal goes. Esau, he wasn't able to even look at the fact that this is just a momentary, temporary hunger that I have. He was just being governed by the hunger at that moment and gave up an eternal reward because of it, an eternal moment. And whenever we find ourselves in the same situation where the flesh is just picking at us, I want to think about this question. Are you wiser? Are you smarter than an animal? Can you get beyond just the fears and the flavors of the world around you? This is a problem, and it's actually something that I wanted to bring. I wanted to weave it into the text. It's very interesting the way things are playing out right now. In a lot of ways. Very interesting the way things are playing. I had no idea. It was like 4 Sundays ago. Something like that. You can take a look at the records. My sermons are on YouTube now. So we have record of that. Well, I have record of it. I keep record of what I do. But it was like 4 or 5 Sundays ago when I preached the sermon about Yeshua, the God or the Lord of hosts, and how Jesus is the God of war. I had no idea that we were going to be seeing so much war in the land when I preached that sermon. You guys know I don't write my own stuff, by the way. You know all this stuff. You know all the stuff about animals. Don't be walking away thinking that Dave called me an ass, because I didn't. Don't be laughing now. I don't write my own stuff. You guys know I got a ghostwriter, a Holy Ghost writer. That's kind of good, huh? I wrote that this morning. I was like, oh, I'm not gonna let the lesson go without that one. That was a good one. Yeah, I had no idea. So I wanted to take a moment, and we're talking about Esau right now, how Esau was just kind of like a ping pong ball, bouncing back and forth. When his belly was full, what was his first thought? I can't believe I sold my birthright. Now think about what's happening in the world right now. There's more sirens going off. Do you know that? You know how I know that? They live right there on the busy street corner. People are getting upset. We all saw a lot of this kind of stuff happening just about 3 years ago. There was this thing called COVID. Everyone was acting berserko bananas. It was going crazy. People rushed into the stores. And I wanted to stop and take a moment to help us stop and realize that we must not act like everyone else. We must not turn on the news and live off the news. We, instead of feeding off the news and consuming the news, need to be feeding on God's faithfulness. Another statement that was written this morning by my brother over there who was teaching Bible class: feed on God's faithfulness, and not be feeding on the news. There's going to be a lot of people behaving like animals. Let us not be any of them. Let not a single one of us allow what happens in the world to affect the fact that God is Lord Supreme in heaven, no matter what happens. I'm going to show you a couple of verses that we can really take a look at, think about, some stuff that is in a certain way prophetic. Now, I'm not going to be like talking like I'm a prophet or anything like that. Nothing like that. That's not the kind of preaching that I do. I don't believe in the hocus pocus kind of stuff, okay? But I am going to take you to the Word of God and show you that no matter what, we need to stay in the Word and let that govern what we do and how we think, and not the world around us. Fears are going to be kind of bubbling up as a result of things happening in the world and what we see on the news. But let's take a look. We're here in Hebrews chapter 12 already. Let's take a look at it now. Verse 18, I want you to take a look at some stuff with me now. Now, this is like a scene, Mount Sinai, okay? Mount Sinai was the mount that children of Israel were approached as they were emancipated from their slavery. And Moses goes up into Mount Sinai, and the God of heaven comes down. And when the God of heaven comes down to the mountain, it's a terrifying scene. It's terrifying. So verse 18 says, "For you are not come unto the mount that might be touched, and that burns with fire, nor unto blackness and darkness, and a tempest or a storm, and the sound of a trumpet, of the voice of words," which voice, when they heard, they asked Moses that the word should not be spoken to them anymore. They could not endure that which was commanded. And if so be as much as a beast were to touch the mountain, it shall be stoned or thrust through with a dart. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, "I exceedingly fear and quake." So we have a scene right here, a scene that's happening on the earth that's so terrifying that it's bringing a lot of fear to the people. Like I said a moment ago, animals are governed by fears. And I'm not going to say that humans or Christians don't feel fear. Fear doesn't show up. But Christians should not be governed by their fears. I mean, you just don't, just considering the one statement Jesus made in Matthew chapter 10 when he said, "Fear not him who is able to destroy the body, but fear him who is able to destroy body and soul in hell." There's a reverence that it is to be directed, and it is not to be to those that have power in this life. And even when God came down, the people were so terrified that they were behaving like animals. They just ran away from it and said, "Well, we don't want to hear none of this." Don't let that happen with you in the Word. There's going to be a lot of stuff in here that you don't like. Well, don't let that happen to you. Moses was somebody who said, even he got to a point to where he feared and he quaked in verse 21. But be able to move forward. He was able to continue. He didn't let that govern. So there was another type of mountain that we ought to be aware of. There was another type of place we need to be aware of. And so it's important to consider what the message is for us. Take a look at verse 18 again. Notice what the author is doing. He says, "We are not come to the mountain that can be touched." We're not approaching the Mount Sinai. That was a thing of the past. That's something that they did. We're going to approach another mountain. So there's the four. We are not come to a mountain, to the mountain that can be touched. Move right on to verse 22. Now he's going to start talking about the mountain that we do approach. He's talking about another kind of mountain now. Let's read about it. Verse 22. "But you come to Mount Zion." Where are you marching to again? Verse 22. "You come to Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God." Oh, mercy. Read this with me. understand what you read. This is a actual description of a place. And as we read the description of this place, stop and take notice now that though your flesh be weak and confined down here, your spirit transcends into another place that we're about to read about right now. In other words, you're not stuck down here, really. It don't matter what happens down here. There's a whole lot of stuff going on down here. You don't even want to stay down here. Who wants to live forever anyway? So you're about to read about a place that you have access to. Okay? I stop and think about it. You get on an elevator that's powered by the blood of the Son, and you just raise on up to this place, this mountain right here. It's hard to get up to a mountain, I know that. Get up to the mountain takes work. Jesus made it so you can just get a front row tickets straight to the mountain, Zion. About to read about it with you right now. It's amazing when you stop and think about it. I just can't help myself, okay? It says that you are come to a Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. Mercy. I'm not going to be all preaching about anything going on where Jerusalem is right now. I love all those people because the God of heaven told me to. I know nothing about the politics over there. I ain't over there. None of us is over there. We don't know what's going on over there. I have no idea what it's like to have to run for my life like that. Anybody here? Maybe one of you does. They ain't told me about it yet. But that's not what's important. There's so much fear going on down there, but if you got God, what does it matter? That Jerusalem was a place to bring God's people. Jesus went there. He cleansed out the temple over there. But when he resurrected and ascended up into heaven, he established a heavenly Jerusalem. I just read about it to you right here. A heavenly Jerusalem. And to an innumerable company of angels. You gotta feel safe. You got them angels hanging around you. You be hanging out with angels, man, but floating around with them up there. Let the word speak to you now. Because this is from the word of God, okay? You can't break it. You can try. Go ahead, try to get Thor's hammer. You can't bust this sucker up. This is where it's at. You can't stop it. Innumerable number of angels right here. That's the mount of the God of heaven. You can't touch it unless the blood of the Son gets you there. To the general, verse 23, to the general assembly of the church of the firstborn. That's you, baby. That's you. The general assembly. That's the peasant over here, the king over there, the rich boy up there, the poor boy down there. That's all of us, the general assembly of all who have become one with Jesus, the firstborn, sweet mercy now, which are written in heaven, and to the God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect. Verse 24, and to all other stuff I was talking about, the angels, who cares about that? It sounded impressive when I was all raising up my voice. It sounded fancy. Verse 23 is when it really starts to change. I love the way the King James writes about John the Beloved. You know why? John wrote his gospel. not sure why the other versions. I never looked deep into it because I just don't care about that. What I liked was John in the King James. It says that at the Last Supper he was resting in Jesus' bosom. Last Supper. You even go Lazarus, the man who died, rich man died and buried. Lazarus carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. You know, it would take a lot for me to have to weep to a point to where any man in this room had to hold me. Now, if I lost somebody super dear to me, I know that every single person in this room would approach me and embrace me, and I would just melt into whoever's arms, even this sucker right here, who don't like to touch nobody. Kevin and I never hugged once. And you ain't gonna see that day. Unless something happens. I'm telling you, if Jesus walked in the room, I fall on him. I fall on him because I know. Because I know what he's done for me. When I think about the fact that he who is so pure, he who is so lovely, he who is so powerful, would humble himself to the point that he speaketh himself, I am a worm, not a man. He would do that for me, I melt into his arms, and I melt and I just pretext like this. Think that one day, I'll just be right there outside. The mediator, the new covenant, the blood sprinkled, and speaks better things than that babe. Verse 25 says, see then that you refuse not him that speaks. For if they escaped not who refused him, spoke on earth, much more shall not we escape if we turn away from him that speaks from heaven. That's the warning is given there. You're so much more than an animal. Jesus did not shed his blood for bulls and goats. He did not shed his blood for oxen. He did not shed his blood for dogs. He did not shed his blood for cats, birds, and lizards, and creeping things. He shed his blood for you and me. Because of that, whatever happens, we don't behave like animals. We behave like the children of our Father. Don't let the things going on around you change who you are and who your faith is in. Fear those things. Don't let those fears govern. We have a lot of warnings of not acting like animals in the scriptures, and I went over in the beginning of the lesson. I want to end by taking you back to Job. Like I said, I'm going to take you back to Job chapter 12. Show you some interesting stuff. It's almost like we want to read this almost vicariously. What I mean by that is living it with Job while he's going through, right? and in a certain sense, in a certain way, because of what is consuming all of media right now. You almost want to vicariously live in their shoes at the same time right now. Because, okay, Preacher Dave, it's easy for you to say that right now, but what if terrorists really did come after you? Then would you be so bold? And first of all, it's kind of a pointless question, because I'm not going through it right now. But I have no intent on being insulting to those who are really, really struggling right now. In fact, I would just love it if the word God of heaven would just be preached throughout that land to give those people comfort right now. Because if there's one thing we can learn from what's going on over there, life is fragile. And God is the only place where there's refuge. There's no other refuge. We are all going to look death in the face one day. Every single one of us. The only thing you're going to care about after you die is, did you know Jesus? That's the only thing. Did you hear his voice? Remember the warning out of Hebrews chapter 12. Refuse not him who speaks from heaven. Did you hear his voice? I'm going to show you a couple of interesting things, and we'll finish up the lesson in Job chapter 12. When vicariously live to him now. Job chapter 12, verse 4. Now remember, this is the context of the text we just took a look at. Verses 7 and 8 is what we read in the beginning of the lesson. Learn from the beasts and from the birds and all that. We went through some of that stuff. Take a look at verse 4. I am as one, this is Job speaking, I am as one mocked by his neighbor, who calls upon God and he answers him. The just, upright man laughed to scorn. Job in this moment is being insulted. Job in this moment is being persecuted. And he actually acknowledges that situation, what he's going through in this moment. One of the main points that we find is Job is acknowledging a whole list of emotions that he's going through right now. Go over to the end of chapter 12 with me just for a little bit now. Stop and think about this for a moment. We're going to have a description of the God of heaven. And this is Job speaking. He's talking about God, who God is, and what he is capable of, the kind of things that he does. He starts a few verses back. Now, let me take a look at verse 15 just for an example. Behold, he withholds the waters, and they dry up. Also, he sends them out, and they overturn the earth. Verse 16, he says, with him is strength and wisdom. The deceived and the deceiver are his. And he keeps on going. Verse 19, he says, he leads the princes away captive, overthrows the mighty. Verse 20, he says, he removes away the speech of the trusted, takes away the understanding of the aged. And as he keeps on going, notice what he says in verse 23. He increases the nations and destroys them. He enlarges the nations and straightens them again. I'll never forget, years ago, I came across this text and realized its truth, magnitude. I have no explanation for many of the things that happen in the world, and I can't even begin to act like I know God and his ways, for his ways are above my ways, and his thoughts are above my thoughts. As far as the heavens are above the earth, his thoughts are above my thoughts. His ways are above my ways. For some reason, He causes things to happen. He increases nations. He destroys nations. The way he does it. So it's at me now. Job continues. End of chapter 13. He continues. He starts asking his friend questions. Basically, asking questions like, are you going to go with God or not? Basically, who you're going to show your allegiance to? Yes, he increases the nations, he destroys the nations. A lot of stuff happens. Man cannot utter, man cannot understand it, man cannot fathom. And Job makes this one statement, and it's the main statement. Instead of behaving like an animal, finish up the lesson by looking at verse 15 and the statement Job makes. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. You know that was in your Bible? Man who actually speaks the words. Even if God killed him, I'm going to trust him. No matter what happens. Trust him. He speaks. We at least show a little bit of wisdom. Do not follow after the world and what's going on in society and overseas. Keep your faith in God, not in a president, not in a speaker of a house. Definitely don't fear what may come. Because your citizenship is in Mount Zion. Trust him now, today. If you have need, fully put your trust in him and give your life over. Come.